Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
Oh, it's Kevin's Corner. It's Masters Week. Chris Presley wearing his green. Kevin Bowen wearing his green. You can't see that, but just believe it, feel it, smell the azaleas, feel the birds chirping. To say I am excited would be an understatement, Chris Presley. I've said this before, and I feel safe in saying this because I believe my younger brother-in-law, I've got two brothers-in-law, only one of them listens to the podcast on a consistent basis. Ross has filled in for you before. Does a wonderful job. April 14th, big day in the golf world. Tiger, April 14th, 2019, wins the Masters. The year before, I got engaged on April 14th, 2018. Chris, you kind of put the lie detector on me and said which April 14th was bigger. I'd like to think I'd say 2018, but
I know the true answer.
Gosh, boy, I really hope Maddie isn't, hey, I'm going to listen to Kevin's Corner this week. Just, spur of the moment. I really hope Ross can kind of keep this in the golf family, with that comment as well. Nonetheless, here we are. We're back first week of April. We'll talk a whole lot of, I feel like it's kind of the sweet spot of we're halfway in between free agency and the draft.
Yes.
We're kind of 3 weeks removed from free agency as we record this on Wednesday morning, and we're about 3 weeks out from the draft. So kind of a state of the offseason, if you will, at this point. We'll give our Masters picks to close out the show. And how you been, man?
I've been doing well.
Good.
As we look out the window right now on this dreary Wednesday morning, other than that, spring is starting to come around. What's the weather supposed to be like this weekend for the Masters? Do you know?
I know it's a little dicey yesterday. I think they only got out there yesterday morning. I think today's kind of gloomy as well. But I think fairly decent, not super hot.
Perfect.
Part of me would like a little bit warmer for Tiger. But at the same time, he got the right draw. He got the morning draw tomorrow on Thursday and got the afternoon draw on Friday. And I speak 98% with my heart, 2% with my head. The 2% with my head legitimately thinks Tiger can finish top 15, top 20.
Nothing wrong with that. Especially for when did he decide? Because it was coming down to the wire, right?
I mean, that's a great point. Very much down to the wire. I mean, I think a lot of people even close to him didn't think a month ago he was doing this. But, I saw a great comment. David Faraday, who's kind of a kind of a comedian as well. One of golf analysts, he basically said to John Feinstein, longtime sports media person, basically said to him back in February, Tiger will play because he can't resist the urge not to. You can probably use the phrase resist the urge in a whole lot of things with Tiger, but that is so true when it comes to him in this tournament. I mean, it's so true with him in winning in general,
right.
Major championships in general, but the dude, in my opinion, maybe more so than any other athlete, certainly Tiger or certainly Jordan, Brady, you can go even to generations before ours as well. I don't know if anyone has craved winning and ripping the heart out of an opponent more than he has. Maybe it looks more because it's golf and you don't really think of golf in that sense, but that's how he's wired and that's why he is out there.
I'm As a not a diehard golf fan, as you know, and listeners of the podcast know, one of the things that I need to look into, one of my favorite things that they release is what the menu is for the dinner.
Yeah, Hideki Matsuyama had it last night.
Okay,
heavy Japanese flair,
right
to it. Am I saying it right? Is it Wagyu beef?
Yep.
I believe that was kind of. I've seen Wagyu on a few.
That's a very nice cut.
Menu. Yeah, I was going to say, that's usually a cut. I'm kind of like, oh, boy, yeah, I'll take your ground chuck. But, yeah, it had a Japanese flair to it. I think Jordan Spieth was very happy. He mentioned that as well. So, yeah, Champions Dinner last night, and then, obviously, the tournament beginning on Thursday. All right, enough golf talk until the end. Let's talk Colts free agency, Chris. And, there's a lot of ways we can go to it. It's not a ton of direction, but basically I just kind of wanted a state of the offseason at this point. I'm a bit confused by things right now. There are names out there, certainly still, but I'm a bit confused by how the Colts have operated so far. I obviously, you guys know that I disagree with Chris Bauer's approach to the start of free agency when you have the opportunity to get some kind of high B level players.
Right.
Him sitting out that part, he's explained before. Again, I don't agree with it, but I at least see his statements. The fact that, we're now 3 weeks into this and he's let a lot of, I don't know, a lot might be too much, but several in-house guys leave that I thought could return. And he hasn't really supplemented that with any other signings. That is where it's kind of head-scratching for me. Because, again, that goes against kind of how he is really operated in free agency. And I think the thing that stands out to me the most is, again, I have stated that mid-March to late March, that's the time to find the most proven talent in the offseason. There's a reason Eric Fisher was available in May. There's a reason why those guys are still on the board the deeper you get into spring, summer, etc. Doing things differently when the results have not been what you want them to be is wise and is smart. But at the same time, you look at the draft in 3 weeks, Chris, the Colts are not in a position this offseason that they have been in past offseasons where you've seen, it's okay. They're going to have 5 draft picks in the first 120 spots or something like that, to where you get to the draft, you're going to throw a bunch of darts at the board, like 2018, for example, when they had those 4, I think it ended up being 4 second-round picks. Well, Tyquan Lewis and Kamoko Terry would fall into the miss category. Lewis, health has contributed, but just for the sake of argument, they haven't panned out. But Darius Leonard and Braden Smith have unquestionably worked. And so, when you have 4 or 5 chances at it in the first 3 or 4 rounds, you can find a couple of very quick impact guys. You're probably going to find a couple that are going to be slower developing or just misses. That's fine. That's part of the draft. But you look at it right now, you've got 2 picks in the first 100 and whatever it is, 120?
Yeah.
You just have that second and that third.
Right.
And your quarterback is a need. And left tackle's a need, and wide receiver's a need, and tight end, and depending on how you look at things, maybe secondary. That is where it is extra confusing to me of man, you got the $20 million in cap space. The results haven't been there. But even if you just look at the resources at your availability, when you talk about the draft, it hasn't been there for you. Matt Ryan and Yannick Ngakoue are going to help this football team out a whole lot. In the one-score games, certainly. But supporting Ryan in particular, I think, is something in question. I was kind of playing around with numbers before our morning show today, Chris. And these are some of the guys walking out the door and the starts they had last season. And I want to make this very clear. Some of these guys did not play the level of football that you wanted them to play. Some guys should not be in your future plan. Some of them should. But I think it's just a reminder of the playing time you're losing. And then have people start to think about, okay, where are you going to replace that? Some of these guys are still free agents, I should mention. They could possibly come back. Chris Reed, 6 starts. Eric Fisher, 15 starts. Al-Qadim Muhammad, 17. George Odom, 7. T.Y. Hilton, 9. Zach Pascal, 13. Xavier Rhodes, 13. Mark Glowinski, 14. Your kicker is still out there, Michael Badgley, as well. So that's what? 80-ish starts? I don't know. 6? I don't know. I'm trying to do it off the top of my head. It seems like a big number.
A very good amount.
And the guys that you so far have signed, and again, I'm not putting Carson Wentz and Rock Yassin in that. I'm not putting the trade guys in there.
Yeah.
Brandon Faison, 13 starts, and Armani Watts, start. Are there guys in-house like Danny Pinter that you expect to, certainly take a... Yeah, and again, Pinter on paper, it makes sense to me, but some of the others are a bit head-scratching to me.
Who do you think is the biggest one that we've let walk that you thought we would bring back?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And again, like you said, just breaking down the numbers, I know there are multiple that have played a lot of games for us. Some of them in your article you listed that we would probably let walk, but there are some that you thought we might bring back.
I'd probably put Chris Reed on that list just because it would improve your depth. I don't know how much it changes your starting five looks like, but that's kind of my thing is if you make another move at left tackle, now all of a sudden Matt Pryor could be your 6th offensive lineman. Matt Pryor could start right guard. He has some experience there. If you bring back Chris Reed, Danny Pinter can be the utility. I think something we got to keep in mind of this O-line is, Chris, it's not the same durable Anthony Costanzo-led unit that it was when Phillip Rivers came here in 2020.
Correct.
And this, dude, it's freaking hard, and now I sound like Ballard. It's freaking hard to keep your O-line together, keep them healthy, and do it for longer than, 2 years, 3 years? That's just not realistic. Think back to 2020 and where the line is now. Costanzo, of course, is gone. Quentin Nelson's had 3 surgeries. Ryan Kelly's had some injuries start to pile up. Even Braden Smith has had a couple of just kind of odd, really, injuries that have sidelined him. Nothing too crazy, but some that have popped up. So, and again, that's against Ballard's MO. It just, some of the Ballard core philosophies, all of a sudden I don't see him necessarily sticking with, or the ones that I probably disagreed with, he's even gone further on, which doesn't really check that box. I thought Stephen Holder made a really interesting point earlier today in saying that, I'll just read Stephen's tweet. There are a growing number of agents out there who have told me that the Colts are being way too stingy on spending. I can't speak to why that is, though some have theories, but regardless of the why, it is what it is at this point.
I saw that.
Kind of goes back to a lot of questions we've gotten since free agency started, Chris, of how much does the lack of a quarterback play into how attractive of a spot you are. I think when all things are even for a pass catcher, it could be a tiebreaker. But dude signed to play in Detroit and Jacksonville and wherever else on an annual basis. And you need to make sure that you show them proper value. Again, especially when your own guys, you're letting kind of walk.
Yeah.
I thought the Danico Autry thing was such a mistake last offseason for many reasons, but I think it was another one when you have a guy in-house that has exceeded, I think, expectations. Aren't those the people that you're supposed to reward? Like, what is that message sending to your locker room? Ballard always says that.
Right.
And I thought the Autry one sent the wrong message. And I think some agents clearly are starting to realize, like, I mean, we'll get into talks with the Colts, but we know where the value is.
But how's that chips all in,
Right. And again, Irsay, that was a ludicrous statement and should have never been said. Irsay meant it more of just how we've got to be all into the operation in the sense of we got to work hard and we've got to, be committed and work in the spring and all that. Free agency is weird. It's not normal business. And I think you just have to accept that if you're in a managerial role. You've got to realize that you're walking into the store and you can't dictate those prices, and there's not other stores to necessarily shop at with the same exact value. You can't go across the street and say, oh, yeah, gas over there is, whatever, $4.05 right now instead of $4.15, something like that. Like, that's just not how it operates. If you pay for the $4.05, you're probably going to get $4.05 type results. I know gas isn't exactly the best analogy to use.
It's like when we were kids, did you ever have in elementary school around Christmas time, your parents would give you like $20 and then you would have like a little Christmas market at your school.
Yeah.
And you'd have to get so many gifts for the family. So you had to decide, okay, I can only spend $5 on this person.
Kind of a math game a little bit. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. You're building your own team, if you will, with a salary cap.
Yeah.
It's just it just seems to be, boy, you'll love to see I'm sure the financials of the Ballard house, I'm sure it's high and tight and kept in a very nice, that's a clean looking checkbook if they're still operating under those watches there. It just, I don't think it sends the right message to the rest of the league when they're trying to attract people. And I don't think it sends the right message internally either. Because, again, you've had shortcomings. And you don't have the draft capital that you would like or you have had in past off seasons. And I go back to something about, well, when you don't have a quarterback, you're unable to attract wideouts. Again, I think that's largely a myth. I think Ballard's MO and his track record of that position speaks for itself. And it's not just free agency, Chris. What about a trade for Amari Cooper? What about a trade for Robert Woods? We saw another one in the AFC this past week. What about Devontae Parker going to the Patriots as well? Those are some things that, again, I just don't agree with. If I'm making a need list right now, in some order, I'd put on there 2 wideouts. I'd put a tight end on there. I'd put another defensive back, ideally a versatile one. The Watts signing, to me, Armani Watts is like, it's probably a bit too much to call him a George Odom. George Odom played nearly 1,000 snaps in his time here. I think Watts has played like 200-something, 300-something.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go there yet. I don't think we've seen him enough on defense to truly know. And I would say tight end. I don't know if I mentioned already. Tight end and probably 2 offensive linemen? Definitely 1. I think you need a tackle. I've always said all along that you've just got to kind of swallow your pride when it comes to some of free agency. Am I calling for a 2013, 2015 Ryan Grigson spending spree? No, absolutely not. But when the results have been that, you couple in the draft picks, you couple in supporting Matt Ryan, another new quarterback, I think you've got to make some sacrifices and deviate and alter your plan. It's not like you've got a rookie contract quarterback sitting in your building and you've got to pay him $200 million coming up.
Right.
Quentin Nelson's going to get a nice extension. It's going to be healthy. That's about it. Healthy, I should say. Hefty, probably.
Both.
I guess healthy, too. I kind of state of the offseason at this point, Chris. If you've got anything else, feel free.
No, I'm patiently waiting to see how things unfold. Like you said with Stephen Holder's tweet, a lot of us are, everyone who listens to this podcast, we're all just kind of waiting. We're waiting to see with the restructure, which we'll get to in Twitter questions from Matt Ryan. How does that help? The Tyrann Mathieu noise around Watts has been already very vocal on Twitter. I don't know if you've followed him.
I know. I was like, oh boy, he's taking a shot at me because I kind of made a reference there. For those that don't know what Chris is referring to, Armani Watts wears number 23. And, I tweeted something to the effect of like, exactly the former chief safety every Colts fan thought would be coming to Indianapolis, referencing Tyrann Mathieu. And I don't think Armani Watts like that, which totally get that. But I would say the resumes speak for themselves.
Yes.
With those 2 players there. So we'll see how April, I certainly expect some other moves. I don't expect anything super notable. But we'll see how things happen. We'll start to get more into the draft. We're obviously going to get closer to the draft, and so we'll get more into that as well. I know some people have been asking about Beers with Bowen and things like that. I think we're going to make a slight kind of adjustment to that this year, incorporate our morning show, Kevin and Query, with that. So when more details come out about that, we'll keep you posted there. But look for something kind of that week leading into the draft, and we'll let you know when we have more stuff on that.
All right. You want to jump into Twitter questions?
Let's do it, man.
Not too many this week, but a lot of good ones and a lot of key details. First one comes from Rodney. Do you feel the Matt Ryan contract reconstruction was done deliberately to sign an existing free agent or just to soften the blow for Quentin Nelson's potential contract upcoming?
Yeah, Rodney, it's probably the latter. Ballard has been very, very focused on always keeping the flexibility open. It's interesting, though, because Matt Ryan's cap hit, I think, is much higher next year. So I thought to myself, can you sign some guys this year, maybe super front-load it? I know it's not ideal, but that might be kind of the better route to go with that. So, yeah, I would say a little bit of soften the blow for Quentin, but I would say mostly just kind of keeping the flexibility open. Like, existing free agent, I don't know. I don't see anyone that jumps off the page of who that would be from talking to people.
C. Daly has a question regarding the wide receivers coming up in the draft. If these 3 are still available at 42, who would you like? Sky Moore out of Western Michigan, Christian Watson out of North Dakota State or John Mechie from Alabama, who did tear his ACL in the SEC championship.
Yeah, and then what's his name tore it over here, right, in the national title game? Jameson Williams.
Yes.
Gosh, man, that was awful when he went down. Yeah, this is a great question. I mean, and these are the questions that we'll start to get into. Sky Moore, a little bit shorter, explosive, nearly 1,300 yards for Western this year. Watson is just freak size, speed, you kind of create a player. Selfishly, I would like to have seen a little bit more dominant at that level. So I think that is something that you would like to see. And then Mechie, of course, the Alabama track record, produced at a really, really high level. He's probably the safest, which is kind of weird to say coming off the ACL, but I think anytime you're projecting guys from a little bit of a lower level, you have to point that out.
Right.
I do like Sky Moore. I think he plays a little bit bigger than his size. Again, pretty explosive as well. He would probably be the route I would go, probably him, Mechie, and then Watson. You think about Watson, again, the size and the speed, Chris, it's mouth-watering, but at that level, you really want to see them. I know North Dakota State doesn't necessarily air it out. They build big leads. They don't need to air it out. You would like to see a little bit more dominant play out of hand. I don't know if we saw enough of that.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's go to a question from Noah. Hey, Kevin, appreciate all the insight on your Colts coverage that you provide. He lives in Ames, Iowa. So Colts, not very many Colts coverage over there. Read an article in The Athletic about Jim Irsay with the quotes that Irsay claims that Carson Wentz isn't the scapegoat, but he's clearly putting the blame on Wentz if you follow what has been said by Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard. He feels like moving on from Wentz was the correct move, but the offensive line, skill players, and defense as a whole all fell apart at the end of the season. The quotes scream a lack of accountability towards anyone not named Carson Wentz. How concerned are you about the Colts organization as a whole regarding the leadership of the Colts, and are you confident that the roster will get to a championship level? And if so, how far out will they get to that level?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Thank you, Noah. Shout out to Ames. I've never been to Ames. Been to Iowa City. Ames is where Iowa State is. So, yeah, thank you, Noah, for that. I appreciate that. I think you're probably still a year or two away, Chris, from potentially, being there. I always come back to those 4 to 5 big-time serious positions that need some long-term answers. The Wentz stuff, it continues to be fascinating to me. Irsay says he's not a scapegoat, but then, Chris, you can point to like 6 or 7 quotes where it's like, holy shit, you just pretty much said he's a scapegoat without saying that he is. I don't get it, It just, I don't know if I've made this analogy before, but I feel like Carson Wentz was the new boyfriend that walked in the front door and, whatever. He, thought he was spitting in the yard and accidentally spit on the dad's car. Dad's pissed. Dad's like, boy, that's a bad first impression. I'm sorry. I was trying to spit in the yard. The wind blew. I don't know. This sounds like a ridiculous story now that I say it out loud. But he always just got started on the wrong foot. And any little way that you don't walk that fine line, that dad's going to be like, nope, never liked him. And I felt like with Irsay and Wentz and the vaccine decision, that was it.
Yeah.
I mean, because I tweeted out some of those Irsay quotes last week from last March, and I know some people were like, what else do you expect him to say? The Irsay quotes were like, multiple Lombardis with Carson Wentz, generational type of guy, this and that. I don't believe for one second that Jim Irsay had to be heavily talked into Carson Wentz. That room was not all on the we'll do everything we can to get Matthew Stafford. They were not there. And you had 5 quarterbacks drafted in the top 15 picks. You could have gone that route when you were drafting 21 overall. So, I wish I had a little bit more for you on that front. But the Irsay Wentz thing, I felt like it never had a chance to really have true success.
Fair enough. Question from Hank. Let's say the Colts still had the 16th pick in the draft this year. Who should they take?
So 16 would have been where they would have drafted, right?
Yes.
And didn't I see Philly and New Orleans kind of had a big trade involving those picks a couple days ago?
Was that the trade where it was a bunch of picks just back, like they just swapped a ton of
They
picks?
swapped and some future picks involved there.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't know exactly who has that pick right now. But, okay, if you're sitting there at 16, well, first, where's Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett going?
Right.
I think you start there. What would you do at quarterback? I think a lot of people, is there a tackle in that range would also pop into my mind. Obviously wide out. Is Garrett Wilson from Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that would kind of be a little bit of Ballard-like. Do you trade back out of 16?
Naturally.
Acquire some, more draft capital. And then what about taking Jamison Williams out of Ohio State, the guy coming off the ACL who, by all accounts, would have gone, top 10. That would be something that would kind of be interesting to me. But, man, boy, these hypotheticals, Hank, you talk about salt in the wounds.
Yeah.
And that's where the Wentz trade just was a kick and the you-know-what. Because when you really need it, and think about everything that I just talked about before Twitter questions, you need draft resources. The 16th overall pick, that'd be what, the second highest pick this tenure has had? I mean, hell, if you want to go back years, it would be the second highest pick you've had since Luck, if I'm not mistaken. Nelson, right? Is he the only one above him?
Yeah.
I
think so.
Unless I'm totally forgetting somebody off the top of my head there. I think Ryan Kelly was like 18.
Yeah, Ryan Kelly was late teens.
Yeah, so that is just what makes it, again, salt in the wounds. Yeah, Pay was 21, Nelson 6, Hooker was 15.
Oh, that's right, Hooker, yeah.
So, yeah, and that's it, going back to Luck. And, of course, if you want to even go back further than that, it's eons before they drafted that high. Dwight Freeney at 11.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting seeing the ESPN draft or ESPN or NFL network ratings locally on night one of the draft.
Yeah, and the Colts are 42 overall, which is 10 out at the end of the first. Like, if they wanted to, if someone started to fall and they wanted to get to 30, 31, something like that, it wouldn't be the wildest trade package in the world to do that. I think you see some teams. You'd have to give up a good amount, but I'm not going to totally rule that out just yet. I did compile our first mock draft look.
Love it.
For our website. I think there were 6 picks there at number 42 overall. A lot of offensive picks, as you would expect. But, a lot of it's going to be flavor of the month. You had a couple wideouts. Sky Moore was one of the picks. George Pickens out of Georgia was another one. You had Sam Howell, the quarterback out of Carolina. So, again, a lot of this is going to be the board chirping at you, certainly, but a lot of it is going to be internal philosophy on where you're at and how they view quarterback.
True. All right, Kevin, we got 3 more. This next one comes from Sean. He says, okay, this might be a stretch, might not. Reports are coming out the players were soured on Carson Wentz. On Hard Knocks, we commended Quentin Nelson for going to Frank Reich and saying, let's keep running the balls and no more RPOs. But do you think that was because he knew that Carson Wentz would throw it every time on an RPO or check out and throw it instead of run the ball? Curious if you think that Quentin Nelson is one of the players that was soured on Carson Wentz. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, that's a good question, Sean. I forgot about that Nelson scene with Reich during the game. Boy, he was speaking for, I think, 60,000 people inside of Lucas Oil Stadium at that time. And we talked about it after that. It's like more of those forced runs, where, okay, he's our best player, 28, Jonathan Taylor. You got to give him the ball, You can make some adjustments at the line if you need to, run left, run right, etc. But he's got to get it. Nelson's probably a good name. The guy that I thought about as kind of a veteran that spoke up, I'd be willing to bet, Chris, we go back to that Monday podcast recap after the Jacksonville game, then the season. T.Y. Hilton after that Jacksonville game, his comments about Carson Wentz. Yeah, you don't want to have a colleague say that about you.
Right.
It wasn't like scathing, but I've listened to T.Y. Hilton talk for a decade. I think I know when he's saying something and what that means. That was pretty damning to me at that time. Now, obviously, Hilton's a free agent, but he's still extremely respected from a leadership standpoint inside of that locker room there. So, yeah, I don't know. You got anybody that kind of pops in your mind of like, players that soured on Wentz? I mean, you look at social media, Leonard, seems to love him. I don't think it was like this, again, bad human. I think it was just I don't believe in him in a huddle sort of feel to it.
Yeah, Sean's question when I read it initially prepping for the show was the first time that, I never thought about that. And like you said, I guess it would be someone probably in his own huddle because we all know Darius Leonard's stance. I don't think a lot of this came from the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
You can make that argument one way or another, but we're not going to do it on this show. Socially, it seemed like Darius and Kenny Moore and other players respected him and had his back. And not saying that other players didn't, but you would imagine it would be the people that you were around more often than not that would be soured on you, which would be your offensive line group or your skill group.
And honestly, outside of those two, Chris, like who else on offense? I mean, Kelly, I don't know, maybe Doyle, but I mean, Taylor, again, Jonathan Taylor would praise Putin.
Right.
He just, being facetious with that. But I don't see him doing it. So what does that do for the team this year? I think that's kind of another layer to this. We'll get into more as the rest of the offseason unfolds. Is the energy, the life, the new blood. We've talked about that with the Pacers so much. The fact that Matt Ryan is now in that huddle. Matt Ryan is in those meeting rooms. Yes, you got to perform, but there's a track record and a resume there that the Matt Ryan exit from Atlanta has 0.8% of the volatility that Carson Wentz leaving Philly had. So you don't have guys. I don't think you got a lot of guys. And, I hope you guys enjoyed the Jacob Tammy interview that we played for you last podcast, I think it was.
Yes.
I don't think you have a lot of Colts players texting Falcons being like, dude, how is he, man? I'm hearing all these bad things.
Exactly.
Whereas you were doing that with Eagles players last year.
Yeah, that is the exact point that I wanted to make when you asked about the Carson Wentz stuff. People didn't have necessarily a barometer on him. Matt Ryan's been in the league for X number of years. That he's been to a Super Bowl. You can see his character right away. There's no questions with a quarterback like that. So, yes, even though he's older, worst case scenario, whatever. But I think it just raises the bar. The floor is higher than what it was before.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good way to put it.
All right, this one comes from Craig. Kevin, while I admire, what Chris Ballard has done for the pass rushing quarterback, getting a solid player without spending or giving up too much capital, has not done anything for left tackle, wide receiver, tight end, even though there seems to be good value out there. For instance, Robert Woods, a 6th-round pick, as you mentioned earlier, along with Amari Cooper, for 2 late 2nd-round picks are those examples. Why do you think he didn't do more?
Craig, I want to take that last part, and I guess it is your question. Why do you think he didn't do more? Chris, I have thought a whole lot about the why. Put myself in Ballard's shoes, put myself in Ballard's brain, if you will, of just like, okay, wide receiver, I think I know. It's just how Ballard operates. He just doesn't view the position in a free agency light at a very, very high level. The draft thing he's kind of gone back and forth on. We've seen him draft Campbell high. We've seen him draft Pittman high. But, he's also mentioned, you can't expect instant impact from that spot there. The one that's really confusing to me, Craig, is offensive tackle and just offensive line depth in general. Like if you had to, and I get it, it's April 6th, but if you had to name your 6th and 7th offensive lineman right now, I mean, Will Fries, hell, I should probably learn how to pronounce his name before I say it on the podcast. It's like, it just, there isn't that. Remember a couple off seasons ago, the biggest regret Ballard had? O-line depth.
Yes. Yep.
Felt like it cost them the season. And I'm sitting here right now and I'm looking at it and like, Danny Pinter, assuming he's the right guard, never started at right guard in his NFL career. I don't know if he ever started at Ball State. Wasn't he mostly a tackle at Ball State?
Yep.
And Matt Pryor's got one career start at left tackle. So your O-line looks different than it did a couple years ago when you didn't have a lot of depth. And then the starting experience isn't at that level. And then the depth is in question as well. So, Craig, I'm trying to ask the why, and I can't get to myself a lot of answers there.
All right, Kevin, we're going to wrap up Twitter questions today with the question from Joshua. Most draft boards have the Jaguars and Texans taking the top 2 defensive ends in the draft. Do you believe that Chris Ballard is already taking that into consideration, or do you think it's a, quote, we'll cross that bridge when or if we get there, end quote?
I guess you think Joshua's asking this of, like, you draft to what your division is doing?
I think so.
Yeah, Bauer's never really been about that. I mean, sure, you've got to draft to kind of more the NFL. Chris, I don't think the Colts are at a point now where you react to what Jacksonville and Houston is doing from a drafting standpoint. Like, it's a pass-happy league. You've got to pass the football better and defend the pass better, flat out. So that's how I kind of look at things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's how I'd view it. So, again, those positions are important. They should be. Finding people that can block them is important. I don't necessarily look at it like you play reactionary to what the teams in your division do. You talk about it, you discuss in the offseason, you make sure your positions of weakness are strengthened a bit, and that's how you operate there.
Yeah.
With that.
And like Kevin, you mentioned earlier, we're kind of on that bell curve of in between free agency and the draft. So for all of our listeners, we understand we try and bring you as much content as possible as we can. You can always go to 1075thefan.com to read Kevin's articles. We know if you're driving, a lot of times we are creatures of habit and we get used to listening to podcasts that are certain lengths. This one's a little bit shorter, but as we come down that bell curve and head towards a potential reshift of Beers with Bone, which again we'll keep you updated on, and then also draft scenarios, we can't wait to get your questions and answer those as well.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite times of year, and I appreciate you saying that, Chris. So thank you, everybody that continue to listen to the podcast. We'll keep it going throughout the off season, and our morning shows, Kevin and Query, every morning from 7 to 10 a.m. here on the Fan, and we got a good amount of written content as well. So appreciate everybody for listening. Chris Presley, before we go, your pick to put on the green jacket. Well, 2 questions. First, does Tiger make the cut?
I'm going to say yes, just because driving in, I heard that you were not happy with
come on. Speak your mind. You can't, I'm not looking for you to appease
It's one of those that, you know what, I need to do my due diligence and start getting better at just watching golf just so we can banter back and forth a little bit more. I don't know necessarily how much Tiger's injuries are. I'm going to say yes just because he's Tiger Woods. Like, to make the cut, I would hope he would. And that also, there's nothing like going into a weekend, especially now that basketball's over and we've been juiced with all this content. It at least gives you something, even if you're not a golf fan, to watch or tune into on Saturday and Sunday. So I will say yes, he makes the cut.
Your winner.
Max Olma.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. A little bit off the radar, a lot off the radar there. You can make some good money on that.
No, yeah, I don't know if he makes the cut. Who is the? I'm gonna go Tommy Fleetwood.
Okay, another one. A little. You guys, hey, you put $10 on those 2. That's gonna pay out pretty healthy.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Justin Thomas. I think the fact that he's got Phil Mickelson's old caddy on the bag is huge at Augusta National. We'll go with Justin Thomas. I think Tiger will legitimately make the cut, be top 15 or 20. I think he's, by all accounts, he's swinging it really well. 500 days off, walking that golf course. You ever played the Coffin? You ever played Fort here in Indianapolis?
I've not.
For any of our listeners that have, go walk those golf courses, walk 36 in one day, and that'd be like walking the Fort, probably more so than the Fort has a lot of flat holes too. It's no joke, but I think as long as the body kind of, the pain tolerance gets to the point where it's not impacting his swing, like the dude can just sit on his ass when he gets home at night and whatever. He can take a golf cart as soon as he walks off the 18th hole to wherever he needs to go. This course replicates, or I think recognizes history and guys and people that know the golf course more than any other. No one knows it, I think, like Tiger in the field. and I think he's got a legit chance.
How awkward do you think it's going to be for Thomas's caddy to not have to walk out of the fairway after shot 1 or 2 for a save?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a little bit different with the ball striking of Justin Thomas versus the spots he's been with Phil Mickelson over the years. But I can't wait. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year. Obviously, the Final Four. I thought it was terrific. 2 of the 3 games were really, really good. And now we get Masters Week. And after that, Chris, appointment television, boy, we kind of struggle for it, especially here in this market with the Pacers.
Who predicted the winner?
Not having the playoffs. You had Kansas?
I picked Kansas when you asked me, yeah.
Gosh, congrats. Sorry. Did you win our office pool? You had to have.
I didn't participate.
What? Well, I had Purdue. Purdue beat Nova. I still think if Justin Moore would have been healthy, that game could have been a little bit closer.
Oh, for sure.
Rock chalk there. Congrats to you on that. He's Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week. We'll talk to you next week on Kevin's Corner. This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.